Welcome to the John Wornall House Museum. This audio guide will point out some interesting facts and features about the house. As you travel through the house, make sure to pause the audio after each room so that you can fully explore the items in each room. We just ask that you please not touch anything on display. Your tour begins in the front hallway of the house. Completed in 1858, this house was built on the eastern edge of a 500-acre farm. Richard Wornall, his wife Judith, and sons John and Thomas moved to the region from Kentucky and purchased the farmland in 1843. Before this house was built, the family lived in a small wood frame house located 200 feet north of the current site. After the death of his wife, Richard Wornall returned to Kentucky, leaving the property to his two sons. Thomas died 4 years later of cholera while heading to California for the gold rush. This left the 500-acre farm to John alone. John first married Matilda Polk in 1850, but she died childless after just 1 year of marriage. He remarried in 1854 to Eliza Shallcross Johnson. Eliza was the 17-year-old daughter of Reverend Thomas Johnson of the Shawnee Indian Mission. 4 years later, this grandiose home was built, and the old cabin was likely used as slave quarters and later to house hired servants and field hands. The Wornalls were farmers and grew corn, hay, oats, and wheat, and sold and bred horses and mules. Records show that they made enough money in their first year of farming to completely pay off their initial land purchase of $5 an acre. We'll head next into the parlor, which is to your right if you have just entered the front door. You should now be in the parlor. The parlor was an extremely formal room used for entertaining guests and for hosting special occasions like weddings or funerals. Eliza Wornall, as lady of the house, would have been responsible for all hosting in this room. Slaves would have entered this room to clean it and to bring refreshments, but Eliza would have served guests. The piano in this room would have been an important center for entertainment, especially during family celebrations like Christmas. This piano is a square or boxed Steinway grand piano from 1867 and belonged to the Wornall family. Pianos sometimes had an unusual purpose during wakes and funerals during this time period. Coffins would often be set on top of the piano because the piano was typically the only piece of furniture in the house large enough to accommodate an adult-sized coffin. Eliza Wornall died of complications from giving birth to her youngest child, Thomas, or TJ, in 1865. She left behind her oldest son, Frank. 5 daughters had all died before the age of 3. When John remarried a year later to Eliza's cousin, Roma Johnson, their wedding took place in this room. Let's head across the hall to the sitting room. You should now be in the sitting room. The sitting room was the center of family life, similar to the modern living room. It has a more relaxed atmosphere than the parlor and would have been where the family spent most of their free time, gathering in the evenings after the workday was done. The table by the window has 2 games common to the mid-19th century. The game to the left is the checkered game of life, now simply known as life. Milton Bradley created the game in 1860 to wild success. To the right is a cribbage board which belonged to John Wornall. Cribbage was invented in the early 1600s but enjoyed a surge in popularity in the 19th century due to Charles Dickens' story, The Old Curiosity Shop. Many people ask about the wallpaper in this house and if it is authentic, especially in this room. This wallpaper is based on a similar pattern found underneath layers of paint when the house was turned into a museum in the 1960s. So while it is a reproduction, it closely mirrors the wallpaper that would have been here originally, although it is not an exact replica. Take a look at the United States map in the lighted case. This map is from 1844, the year after the Wornall family arrived in this area. Notice how much of the United States was still unsettled. The Wornalls' original property stretched to modern-day State Line Road, and Kansas did not become a state until 1861. The Wornalls literally lived on the edge of the United States. Life on the border also put the Wornalls in the center of the Border War conflict, a series of violent conflicts between 1854 and 1861 over the issue of the legality of slavery in the proposed state of Kansas. Missouri was a slave state since its statehood in 1821, and most slave owners engaged in small-scale slaveholding, owning 10 or fewer enslaved people. The Wornalls owned 6 enslaved individuals in 1850 and 4 in 1860. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 banned slavery in the rebelling Confederate states, but the practice continued in Union states like Missouri. Nevertheless, John began to pay his enslaved workers a wage for their labor after the Emancipation Proclamation, although most likely he did not free them. This went on for a while until all 4 enslaved people escaped in the middle of the night, having been paid the day before. Their fate is unknown. On the wall is an 1861 Springfield rifle, a gun commonly issued to Union soldiers during the Civil War. Unlike modern firearms, Springfields were non-repeating. The gun had to be reloaded each time it was fired. A skilled soldier might have been able to load and fire the rifle up to 4 times in 1 minute. Let's move through into the next room, the dining room. You should now be in the dining room. The dining room would have been a versatile space. Special feasts and everyday meals would have both been served here. This room had another, more shocking use during the Battle of Westport, which took place on October 23, 1864. The Wornall House was occupied as a field hospital throughout the battle, and this room served as the surgery room, with operations most likely taking place right on the Wornalls' dining room table. The Battle of Westport was a culmination of Confederate General Sterling Price's rampage throughout Missouri in an attempt to recruit men for his cause, distract Union troops from the war in the East, and to take control of the state. One of Price's regiments took control of the Wornall House as a hospital through midday. As the Union pushed south, the Confederates evacuated, taking the men they could and leaving the seriously wounded behind. When Union forces arrived at the house, they took prisoners of war and began treating their own wounded here. The Wornall House was devastated. Small items looted, large items broken and destroyed, doors and windows smashed or removed, and even the stairway railing was completely removed to enable stretchers to be carried up the stairs to the 2nd floor. The display on the center table has many artifacts from the Civil War, including surgeons' tools, medical bottles, and cannonballs. The cannonballs and bullets are relics of the Battle of Westport, excavated either on this property or nearby. If you are interested, pause this guide to take some time to read more in-depth information about the Battle of Westport and Union Military Order No. 11 on the banners in this room. When you're ready to move on, we'll head to the kitchen. But first, note there was no interior doorway connecting the dining room and the kitchen, although there is a pass-through on the east wall in the china cabinet. The kitchen, like those in many Southern-style homes, was separated in order to keep the house cooler and to avoid the smoke and smells of the cooking fire. To reach the kitchen, exit the exterior door on the southern wall and take a left on the porch. You will find the kitchen directly behind the staircase next to the marked public restroom. You may want to pause here on the porch for a minute to enjoy the air. These south-facing porches, or galleries, would have been used for exactly that purpose, for getting fresh air and a breeze. Family members or guests may have slept on these porches in the hot summer months, as they would have been cooler than the rest of the house. Roma Wornall, John's 3rd wife, glassed these porches in the early 20th century to create an interior passage to the newly added bathroom. What is now a bathroom was originally a pantry and woodroom. These porches were removed and restored back to their original 1858 condition when the house became a museum. Now let's move on to the kitchen. You should now be in the kitchen. The wall between the kitchen and dining room is 24 inches thick, keeping heat and smells confined to the kitchen. You can see the thickness of the wall by looking through the pass-through. The kitchen was the center of activity for the household, where most of the family chores would have been performed by slaves and servants. The Wornalls originally practiced open hearth cooking. Most of the cooking was done on the brick hearth using both open flame and hot coals. You can see a Dutch oven on the hearth covered in coals. This is how the majority of baking would be done. The long wooden furniture item next to the fireplace is a dry sink. Because there was no running water, buckets of water were carried from the well or cistern and stored here. The dry sink could also serve as a food preparation area. Near the window is a trap door that leads to the root cellar. Perishable foods would have been stored there, taking advantage of the natural refrigeration of the limestone foundation of the house. Eliza and her son Frank may have also hidden in the cellar during the worst of the fighting during the Battle of Westport, only emerging as their house was turned into a hospital. The door at the rear of the kitchen would have led to several outbuildings, an ice house, smokehouse, cistern, and well. During the Battle of Westport, Eliza Wornall exited through this door to get a ham to feed the wounded soldiers and was almost hit in the head with a cannonball that passed close to the house. The miss was so close that her hair was blown down from its pinned-up hairstyle. John was not in the house during the battle. He was trapped behind Union lines in Westport, unable to reach his home or communicate with his wife and child. Let's head back into the main area of the house. Return into the house the way you came and make your way back to the entry. Use the interior stairs to reach the second floor of the house. Once you reach the upstairs landing, resume this audio guide to continue your tour. You should now have reached the upstairs landing. Before you enter one of the bedrooms, pause to look out the balcony windows. In the summer, this small balcony would have added some much-needed circulation of air to the upstairs rooms, as well as to the entry below. John also would have been able to view most of his property from this balcony, looking symbolically westward. The framed wreath on the wall is a wreath made from the hair of over 50 different individuals of the same family. Hair art was common during the Victorian time period and served as both a treasured family heirloom and a reminder of loved ones who had died. Next, let's move into the children's bedroom. It is the blue bedroom to your left if you have just walked up the stairs. You should now be in the children's bedroom. All of the Wornall children would have shared this single bedroom. However, there were typically not more than 2 to 3 Wornall children in this room at any time. John fathered 10 children in his lifetime, 7 children with Eliza and 3 with Roma, but only 4 survived to adulthood, and there were large age gaps between the surviving children. Those children that died did so in infancy or as a toddler. 19th century children owned few toys. Those they did own were often handmade. Store-bought toys were a luxury, even for wealthier children, and they would typically only receive such a toy at Christmas. Children also played less than they do today. They would have had chores to do in addition to studying. The wealthy and privileged Wornall children all went on to higher education, unusual for children of a frontier farmer. John was a strong advocate for education, despite not having much formal schooling himself. He served as a longtime trustee and donor of William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. It makes sense that he would aspire for his boys to attend college. The main bed is from 1835 and is a rope bed, meaning that there are rope supports for the mattress rather than springs or slats. This would have been the most comfortable type of bed at the time. There is also a trundle bed beneath that could easily slide underneath the bed for storage. The smallest bed is for dolls and was possibly a furniture maker's sample. Before photography was widespread, miniature samples would be created so that furniture makers could display their skills. Notice the chamber pot to the left side of the bed with its crocheted lid cover. Before modern plumbing, people used chamber pots during the night to go to the restroom and emptied them in the outhouse in the morning. Let's move back across the landing and enter the final bedroom on the tour. You should now be in the master bedroom. In addition to being John's room with Eliza and later Roma, infants and young children would often sleep in their parents' bedroom, giving easy access for mothers who were breastfeeding and enabling parents to keep a close eye on very young children. Childhood accidents were common. You'll notice that the windows in this house do not have screens, even though these low windows would be open on hot summer nights. Until children were old enough to learn to be cautious, it makes sense that adults would keep a close eye on them at all times. For cold nights, people could use a bed warmer. One is located to the left of the fireplace. Coals were taken from the fireplace and placed inside this brass pan to warm the sheets before getting into bed. Some people would also heat rocks or bricks in the fireplace and put them at the foot of their bed. The blue rocking chair in this room was originally owned by John Wornall. Its style is known as a Lincoln rocker because Abraham Lincoln was said to have favored the design of this chair. He was sitting in a similar style of chair in Ford's Theater when he was assassinated in 1865. You may have already noticed the hidden door next to the bed. In 1858, that wall was solid, separating the family quarters from a guest space known as the strangers' rooms. Originally, the only way to access those guest rooms was to use the stairs on the outside porch next to the kitchen. John's wife Roma lived until 1933 and was the first resident to experience modern amenities such as electricity and plumbing in the home. With the addition of a small bathroom to the rear of the home, Roma added this door so she could have direct access to that space. This changed the nature of the guest bedrooms, connecting them to the house and making them an extension of family bedrooms. By this time, separate guest quarters were largely unnecessary as travel was faster and hotels more accessible. We ask that you do not enter this door as those rooms now serve as Wornall Major's administrative offices. Thank you for touring the John Wornall House today. Make your way back downstairs and exit through the front door. If you enjoyed your tour, we appreciate reviews on Google, TripAdvisor, Facebook, or wherever you share your travel experiences.